Hey, so this video is about reviving an old work truck. It's not necessarily a how-to video. I'm just going to go through a slideshow of the stuff that I did to this truck to spruce it up a little bit, and you guys can use some of these tips and pointers to do the same thing to one of your old work trucks to make it worthy of the road and work worthy. So here it is. Alright, so this is the truck. It's a 1971 Ford F100. Nothing too special. I bought it as a work truck for 400 bucks, so I got a pretty good deal on it. It doesn't look too bad in the pictures, but it's got a lot of rust. One thing it did have going for it though is it had the Ford 300, which was their inline six engine, and honestly I think that it's about the only good thing that Ford ever did, because this engine just ran beautifully. It had over 300,000 miles and never skipped a beat. It also had the Borg & Warner T18 transmission, which is a 4-speed manual. Nothing special about it. It's pretty stout though. Never had any issues with that. This is just another picture of the truck. You can't really tell, but it's got a lot of rust, a lot of rot, a lot of pitting. So that's something that I really wanted to fix on it. But before I could do that, I figured it's more important, since this is a work truck, to make it a work truck, and that included getting new suspension. So this is the back shocks. The rear leaves were pretty good. You know, they didn't really need replacing, so I just replaced the rear shocks. I put in F250 HD shocks in place of the half-ton shocks to make it a little more beefy, you know, haul a little more stuff. This is just a picture of working on the truck in the pit in the shop there. These are the front springs. Also, F250 springs up front. You can see the old spring is broken and shot, you know, so I figured it's best to replace that. This truck's going to be hauling, you know, car trailers and whatnot. You want a beefy suspension, so I opted for the 3/4 ton package. There's the front suspension installed, and that was about it for the suspension. Everything else was good, you know, the bushings and everything up front and that wishbone, you know, everything was good, so I didn't mess with any of that. One problem that it did have though was a really weak brake system. All the lines were dry rotted, so here's a couple pictures of the new lines that I installed. Figure brakes might be fairly important, you know. After all of the mechanical stuff that I fixed up, figured it'd probably be a good idea to replace the floor, because sooner or later you're going to fall through this. You know, I mean, the floor is pretty much non-existent. So cut the floor out, replace it with new sheet metal, obviously, because yeah, it's a work truck, but I also want it to be safe. This was a huge headache. I have a whole video on the how-to process of how I did this, so if any of you guys are interested, go and check that out. It's on my channel. But yeah, huge headache. It was it was awful. So anyway, this is the new floor. Well, half the new floor welded in. After that, it was good to go. You know, it was ready to roll, but it still didn't look too good. So I wanted to do some cosmetic work, and started off with the front fenders. That's what this is a picture of. Obviously, it's rotted away. Got some of that Minnesota moss on there. So instead of buying new fenders, since this is kind of a budget build, I just wanted to fix it and be done with it. You know, make it look good but not perfect. It's not a show truck by any means. So I got some donor fenders, cut the new metal out, cut the rusty stuff out, and then took some angle iron and a rubber mallet and just shaped the steel to basically how it's supposed to be. and then tack welded it in. But before I did that, I covered the inner fender with POR 15. It's kind of a rust inhibitor, just so that way it wouldn't keep rusting even after I put the new metal in there. So this is the new patch panel welded in, or tacked in. Then I just go and continue welding until it's fully welded in. And since my welding's not perfect, it was a little wavy here and there, so I used some body filler to kind of smooth it all out. Then I threw a coat of primer on it, and it's not perfect, you know, but it looks better than a big rusty hole. So then I moved on to the other side. Same exact process, cut the rust out, got the new piece of metal in there, started tack welding it in. And you'll notice that my tack welds are a few inches apart, and that's just so the metal doesn't warp because it's real thin. So you don't want to run a straight bead on sheet metal. It'll just start warping and you'll end up with a huge mess. So this is the other fender once it's welded in, solid. Then obviously threw some body filler over it again and called it good. And then I got to the bed sides, which were extremely pitted, so took it straight down to steel. Any of the rust that I couldn't get rid of in the pits, I used rust reformer on, and that basically stops the rust in its tracks and makes it good to go. So I used the rust reformer in the pits and then covered all the pitted material with body filler so the bed sides were all smooth again. This is a picture of the body just primed up, you know, ready for paint. But before I could do that, I had to fix the bed. And this was kind of another pain because it's something that I wanted to kind of avoid, but I couldn't haul anything in this bed because the minute you put any pressure on that thing, you know, you were going to fall through. So got some sheet metal, cut it up, measured, and then cut out the rust. And that center frame rail right there, it looks like it's really rusty, and it kind of was, but I could stand on there with my whole weight. It was still pretty solid, so figured I'm not even going to replace it. Just going to leave it how it is and get the new metal over top. So that's the new metal when it's starting to get tacked in, which was an extremely long process, by the way. And this is when it's all finished up, and you can see the rest of the bed is, there's no holes in it, but it's, you know, rusty and it's kind of going. So I cleaned the whole thing up, sanded it down, got it prepped, and then used POR 15 to coat the entire bed to stop it from rusting. I would use bed liner, but like I said, this is a budget project, you know. I think I only spent about $1,200 on this truck total, including the $400 that I bought it for. So I mean, I cut a lot of costs, and the POR is going to hold up, you know, not as good as bed liner, but it's doing the job, so figure it's good enough, you know, for an old work truck. And this is basically the finished project after a lot more sanding and prep work and everything. Finally got it painted, and believe it or not, this is paint out of a rattle can. I mean, you can do pretty amazing things with the rattle can, you know, if you want to. If you take your time and do the right prep work, you can end up with a really good looking vehicle. I wouldn't recommend going and spray painting, you know, just anything, but I mean, if you got a $400 work truck and you don't really care, you just want it to look a little bit better than how it did, then I highly recommend going this route. It's cheap, it takes a long time, but I don't know, I had a lot of fun doing it. And yeah, I mean, now I have a good looking work truck that isn't an embarrassment driving down the road, you know? So that's pretty much it. Hopefully you guys got a couple tips from this or whatever, and hopefully motivate you guys to revive your own work trucks.